Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, and it is official, Canada has been betrayed. This is official now that Canada has been sold out to the United Nations. This has been made plainly clear. It was signed on yesterday, the Global Compact for Migration. It was a tweet that was put out by Ahmed Hussein, whatever the fuck his stupid shitbag's name is, that he announced officially that Canada had signed on to the Global Compact for Migration, thus solidifying that we have now had our sovereignty of our borders handed over to the United Nations. I hope the rest of you are as pissed off as I was when you heard about this, because I lost my shit. I was actually on my way home from one of my exams when I found out about it. I was browsing Twitter, I saw this, and I just unleashed on Ahmed Hussein because of it. But in his tweet, he ended up saying that today we celebrate Human Rights Day. We took an important step for promoting international cooperation for migration. I had the privilege of leading the Canadian delegation and adopting the Global Compact for safe, orderly, and regular migration. This ended up coming after a poll was put out where some 80% of Canadians were against this idea of the Global Compact for migration for good reasons. For all the reasons that we've laid out in the past, for everyone that has been speaking out about it, has been talking about. Bill Tufts has been probably the best one to go to show you the problems with this Global Compact for migration. You can browse through some of my old videos and show about it. But now, because of this, it is proved, if this wasn't clear in the past, it is proved that the Liberal government is not for the people. Despite the fact this is what they ended up campaigning on, and this is how they have presented themselves. When you put out a poll that shows that 80% of Canadians are against this, considering how left-wing Canada can be, you're betraying your own base, your own Liberal base who are against this. It's not just that because of its conservatives or right-wingers that are against this, but even people on the center-left, the people who consider themselves lifelong Liberals, are against this compact. So now we have treasonous, disgusting pieces of shit people inside of our government. This has been something that they've been spouting off for a long time, and I really wasn't expecting that the protests that ended up going on on Parliament Hill, in Toronto, Saskatoon, in BC. The protests were all over Canada. I didn't really expect to actually make a huge difference, that it was going to make the government not sign on to this. But I guess I had some hope that this is what was going to happen. But this is not the case. We have been sold out. Our government are full of traitors, and this is not going to go unpunished. You can guarantee that. The people of Canada are now pissed. Now, Ahmed Hussein, in this thread that he ended up putting out, was about 7 tweets long. He goes on to spout off the classic Liberal talking points and media talking points about this, where he ends up saying certain things such as a non-binding agreement. Conservatives are doing a campaign of misinformation. It needs to be done that we had to sign on to this, when no, it wasn't. See, the thing is Canada's system, when it came to immigration, it wasn't broke. It never has been broke. But this is sort of the presentation that they're giving out. And the thing is, too, is they're conflating the two, that refugees are the same as immigrants when they're not. Immigrants have made the conscious decision to move here, and they apply for their status, they pay their own way, and that's the way it works. Refugees are people who have been forced out of their home, but even under the Liberal government, the idea of refugees has been conflated, the two. So this is nothing short of treason, if you ask me. I think that the next government that comes into power should start putting out prosecuting the people who are on the front lines of this. I mean, for fuck's sakes, Ahmed Hussein was not born in Canada. He was a Somalian who came to Canada, and he's even stated that when he's done in politics, he plans to move back to Somalia, and then he's going to work as a lawyer to help try and get people who want to move to Canada. Ahmed Hussein is just doing exactly what his UN overlords want. This whole thing has been manipulated right from the get-go. It is part of a larger plot to flood the West with a massive amount of immigrants, have us fighting with ourselves, and then the thing is, too, is when we look at how the government has been changing around our electoral reforms, again, they completely have gone against the first past post system, even though this is the big thing that people ended up voting in the Liberals for. When they do this, they're allowing millions of other people to vote in our elections, and you can guarantee that it's going to come where now they're going to advocate for people who are here on permanent residency status are going to be able to vote. We've already seen this over in BC, where the local governments have been trying to force these people who are not Canadian citizens, haven't earned their right to vote in the elections, because they know that these people are going to vote for the left-wing parties, people like the Liberals, people like the NDP. Their main goal is just against people who consider themselves on the right, because we are true patriots. Despite the fact what the Liberals like to try and paste us as, they try and paint us as, we are the true patriots of this country. We're the ones who are actually trying to stand up and protect our borders, protect the Canadian people, and everyone who is already living here. I'm really fucking pissed off about this. I'm livid. I'm fucking livid about this whole fucking thing. And you know what? What really also got to me was also because I was present on Parliament Hill for these protests. I saw what ended up happening. Now, I'll admit that I actually was a little late, so I missed some of the violence that ended up going down, because I believe that ended up taking place early on. At least, this is my understanding of the situation. That's also why I didn't have video footage, while others do, about some of the violence that ended up taking place. I showed up about 11:15 or so. I missed my first bus, so I couldn't get there on time. But as you've looked at the media reports, you can see how much they've slandered us, the people who were there protesting about this, and even some of the comments that they had inside their paper show like how much of a slander job this is, how much of this was propaganda, plain and simple. So this sort of thing we can see from CTV News when they're talking about this. Let's see what CTV had to say on the subject.
Good evening. Protests turned violent on Parliament Hill today as tempers flared over Canada's migration policies.
Riot Police separating both sides, 9 people arrested. The issue at hand, whether Canada should endorse the United Nations Migration Pact. CTV's Leah LaRocque was there.
Sorry, I had my mic muted. So, first of all, the thing is that they say is 9 people were arrested. It wasn't 9 people who were protesting the compact that were arrested. It was 9 Antifa members who were arrested. They were the ones who came in. They were the ones who got aggressive. They were the ones who started the violence. They were the ones who got arrested. They were the ones who started painting everybody who was there as Nazis, which to me, actually, that just shows that we're doing something right. If Antifa and these far-left groups come in and are trying to paint you as some sort of Nazi, then you're just golden, man. You're doing the right thing. Keep fighting on. These Antifa members are foot soldiers for the old guard, for the globalists. This is exactly what they're here to do. They're here to try and propagate what's really going on and attack the people, so that way we won't actually be more willing to go out and be at these protests for fear of being attacked. Well, that's not going to stop us. We're going to be there. We're going to keep fighting for our country, regardless of what these Antifa pieces of shit, these scumbag excuse for human beings try and do. But CTV doesn't bring this up, and in fact, just like every other media source, they like to throw everybody that was in that protest for the compact in as some sort of far right, or they're associated with these far right groups if they don't actually say it directly. I have no interest in listening to this fucking CTV pieces of shit on this. But here we go. When it comes to CBC, 9 arrested during protests against UN Migration Compact on Parliament Hill. It was not the protest. It was the counter-protest, showing how much these people have been influenced by the amount of money that Justin Trudeau is giving out to them. This was exactly what he wanted when he gave them $600 million. And you know what? If anybody hasn't seen it yet, but I'm pretty sure most have because it's been making the rounds on social media, the interview between Justin Trudeau and Rosemary Barton just proves it. I've never seen such softball questions in my life. She comes in and starts asking him about, do you listen to podcasts? What sort of music do you like? What kind of bullshit is this? This is supposed to be hard-hitting journalists, and they can't even do that. And the headlines they use is things like, well, he can renegotiate major trade deals. No, he can't. He took a year to renegotiate NAFTA, put countless of restrictions in place. We want gender. We want environment. We want indigenous rights. He had a deal in India where we lost $500 million, $500 million, because of the way he acted there. If he went in and just did what he was supposed to do, meet up with Prime Minister Modi and his government, and negotiated this, then went on his vacation, no problem. We probably would have had a fair trade deal. But at that time, India was holding all the cards, and when Trudeau insulted them, then why the hell would they negotiate for a good deal? They say, fuck you, we're going to do exactly what we want. So this is what they ended up, this is his trade negotiation deal. And there's also the time that he said, I'm going to China. He did this last year. I'm going to go to China. I'm going to renegotiate a trade deal with them. We're going to see big results. Soon as he left, his cabinet started downplaying it. He came home empty-handed. This is the hard-hitting journalist that we see in the Canadian mainstream media. Fuck you. Fuck all of you. You are terrible at your jobs. It's either you're terrible at your jobs or the people above you, your editors-in-chief, are just suppressing you so much that you can't do your jobs. But I'm pretty damn sure that many of these anchors, many of these journalists just don't fucking care anymore, or are so built into their own biases, their own side, that they don't even care about giving proper representation. But as this article shows here, it talks about the 9 people arrested at an anti-migration protest on Parliament Hill Saturday afternoon. Protesters from various groups, including Quebec far-right group La Meute, held a rally in front of Centre Block, site of the House of Commons and Peace Towers. Now that's true. La Meute was there. So was the Northern Guard. I saw them for myself. So what? Okay, they were there. These are people who are concerned with what's going on. Now, I'm sure people can point me towards some things that they've done that may be considered extreme. But the main reason they were there wasn't because they are some far-right Nazi fringe group. It's because they were there and they saw the dangers of the Global Compact for Migration, just like everybody else who was there. Let's see. An Ottawa man was arrested and is facing a charge of assault of a police officer after an altercation with an RCMP officer, Ottawa Police said. 8 other people were also arrested and released with trespass notice, said Joseph Law, a spokesperson for the Parliamentary Protective Service. About 167 countries have agreed to adopt United Nations Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, a document that lays out a collaborative approach to dealing with growing global migration. The pact sets out 23 objectives for treating migrants humanely and efficiently. So let's break this down. They don't ever mention who was arrested. In fact, they say counter-protesters also attend the demonstration in opposition, and more than 400 people attend the protests and counter-protests. It was Antifa. You want to talk about a far fringe group? Then talk about Antifa, who have a long history all across the world of committing acts of violence. Do people not remember the G20 last year, where thousands of Black Bloc people came out, committed riots for no reason? They were throwing Molotov cocktails at the police. They committed the acts of violence in that situation. Antifa has been time and again shown themselves to be the pieces of shit, cowardly pieces of shit that they are. But they don't bring this up. They say, it's counter-protesters. But these far-right Nazi groups were there. How terrible is that? And then when they're talking about this, I'm pretty sure every single person who got arrested on Parliament Hill was an Antifa member of the counter-protest, not members of the protest itself. And there were other things that you can see in the video footage. I actually haven't pulled it up from different accounts. But what I'll do is I'll link in the description some of the videos of some of the channels of people who ended up getting some of the footage on here. And you can see in there that there were people from the counter-protesters using their flags and their sticks to hit members of the protesters, people who were there already initially on Parliament Hill. And then this wording that they use to describe the Global Compact for Migration. It lays a collaborative approach with dealing with growing global migrations. You know what? Frank Vaughan had a great breakdown of a video just yesterday where he talked about the language that is used. And this is something that I've noticed for a while too. And I'm talking about the same thing that he was when they say things like collaborative. Well, how could you be against collaborative? It's people working together. How great is that? It sets out a 23 objective for treating migrants humanely and efficiently. Not describing that it gives the UN control over how many immigrants you have to take and that you don't have a say anymore in your border security. That you need to take these people on regardless of who they are, where they come from. And we're already seeing the problems when it comes to this. We are already seeing that we have ISIS members returning to Canada. We have people who have murdered, committed genocide, thrown gay people off roofs, massive rape. And they're allowed back in Canada, and they're just saying, well, it's difficult to prosecute these people. No, it's not. It shouldn't be, because the criminal code, and I forget which part of the criminal code right now it falls under, but it says that if you leave Canada to go fight for a foreign nation, you are in violation of that. You're in violation of that section of the Canadian Criminal Code, and it doesn't even have to be a nation, but a foreign army. That was a foreign army that these people fought for. And this is the route that our country is going down right now. It is absolutely disgusting. But let's take more looks at what they ended up putting out. This is from New Straits Times, which I've actually never heard of until I was looking up some of this stuff about what ended up happening on Parliament Hill. It says, an estimated 200 members of far-right groups and 100 counter-protesters lobbed expletive-laced insults at each other on the snow-covered lawn, resulting in one arrest. Well, actually, it was 9 arrests. It wasn't 1 arrest. Although this was put out, I think, the day after, which means they should have probably known that by now. But, once again, throwing the protesters in as far-right groups, but the counter-protesters were just your average, everyday Canadian citizen who want to welcome people in. But then they even go into this, and this is what really ticked me off about this article. Passerby Atia Rayo stopped to listen to the arguments, but concluded the protesters were misguided. Quote, it boggles my mind. These people are grumbling about all the chaotic migration, but at the same time are complaining about an effort to make it orderly, safe. It's atrocious, end quote. See, this person, who I think it's a guy, says that the protesters are misguided. This guy hasn't read you can tell this guy hasn't read the fucking Compact for Migration. This guy doesn't know the first word that is in there. All he hears is what the bullshit that the propaganda that the media is putting out, saying, oh, it's to be more humane and welcome people in more efficiently. Well, our system is not broken, but it is getting overrun right now with the way that things are going. With the way that things are going at Roxham Road. In fact, I think maybe it's even in this article. Yeah, it is. We'll skip that part. It says, immigration has become a more polarized issue in Canada, where the number of refugee claims last year nearly doubled compared to the previous year. This is because people were crossing our border illegally from a country that was safe, from a country where they had temporary protective status most of the time, and then they ended up coming here because their temporary protective status was taken away, or because they wanted the free handouts from Canada, and now they're saying that it's doubled from last year. This is because people are not going about it the proper way, and our government is doing nothing to stop it. Our fucking RCMP officers are being treated as bellhops. Bellhops! Can you think of anything more disgusting than that? This is supposed to be a reputable, long-lasting police service, and they're fucking carrying people's baggage across the border who are crossing it illegally. God fucking damn, this pisses me off. And the thing is, too, is when it comes to the bullshit that's put out by the media on this whole thing, you can tell because have they ever... I haven't seen it, but have they ever had one person on who is against the Global Compact for Migration to explain the problems of this? No. whenever they do have a conservative on, it's fucking Chris Alexander, who is the old immigration minister, I believe, of the Harper government, who goes on to say, well, it's factually incorrect. It's propaganda. This is exactly what they're doing. This is who they have on.
Well, I think it's factually incorrect to say that it's a treaty or an agreement that would have any legal force whatsoever. And it's factually incorrect to say that it would undermine our sovereignty. This is a political declaration. We can take it or leave it, as can all other countries. But we should take it because when you look at the 23 objectives, they read like a checklist of the things Canada has done in recent decades to win a place in the eyes of the world as basically the model and the example of how to manage immigration well. Now we have...
Oh, really? So how about Article 17, where it's literally saying that they will stop funding two media sources because any criticism of immigration will be considered xenophobia and hate speech? Is that a model you want there, fucking Chris? Is that what you want? They took the only one, the only conservative, the only right-winger who really is for the Global Compact for migration and put him on the air. You know what? Have Maxime Bernier. You know what? Screw it. It doesn't even have to do anything with Maxime Bernier. Have anybody who's against the Global Compact for migration and has read it, have them on to describe what the problem is. The UN is not an elective representative. They have a bunch of people who are they have a bunch of people on there, a bunch of nations that are some of the worst nations ever, and they're part of the UN, and they're part of the UN Human Rights Council, and now the people who have some of the largest amount of immigrants they're trying to ship out are sitting on, when it comes to anything to do with immigration inside the UN, people who helped draft the fucking compact were involved with this. All they're doing, all these nations are doing, is shipping their problems out to other third world countries. To other Western countries that will turn these Western countries into a third world. That's all they're fucking doing. So we have been betrayed, Canada. We have been absolutely betrayed, and it is time to fight back. It is time to fight back because it is not a non-binding agreement, even when this is what they presented as, even as they presented it at the beginning of this piece right here. Whatever this tool bag name is, he ends up even saying it.
The facts. It is a non-global compact on security. That's an agreement to help deal with the migrant crisis around the world. But here are the facts. It is a non-binding agreement. It has no legal authority. Nonetheless, Andrew Scheer and U.S. President Donald Trump, among others, have all refused to sign it.
You know what? I'm going to put this to bed right now about this whole idea that it's non-binding. Sure, technically, it's non-binding. But so was the Paris Climate Agreement. And what ended up happening with that? This came out from the National Observer the other day. December 10th, 2018. McKenna says climate targets could be law in future, and they're making reference to the Paris Climate Agreement, another non-binding agreement. Canada may decide in future to enshrine carbon pollution reduction targets in law, says Environment and Climate Change Minister Catherine McKenna. Another traitorous piece of shit, this Catherine McKenna. And here we go. But Canada's Paris Climate Agreement target won't achieve the carbon emission cuts deemed necessary by the thousands of scientists who helped put together the IPCC analysis. In addition, November 27th UN Environmental Emissions Gap Report showed that without stricter measures, Canada will fall short of its current target. Young people in Quebec have applied to sue the Canadian government over this issue. And the propaganda they put out about this, it's going to be really hard here, no doubt, said the minister. But Canada's committed, and multilateralism really matters. 195 countries came together to get the Paris Agreement, and now we need to make sure we have the rules. The minister emphasized the efforts that China and the European Union are taking to reduce carbon pollution. No, it's fucking not. No, it's not. It's China. China, are you fucking kidding me? China is the biggest polluter on this planet. They have done next to nothing to actually try and stop their global emissions, to curb it. They still use fucking coal, and you're trying to say that that they are a model to be held up, Canada is a better model to be held up right now. I mean, you've pretty much killed the tar sands, and on top of that, you killed the tar sands, which means that Alberta, our richest province, now has seen a huge reduction in the amount of profit they bring in. The one province, pretty much the one province that actually gives out the majority of the equalization payments. We have the Quebec government, which just said that, well, we're not going to allow any pipelines whatsoever to be built in Quebec. This was pretty much a veto that Justin Trudeau gave them, and now they just upped their fucking equalization payments by another, $1.4 billion or something like that? No wonder Alberta wants to separate from the rest of Canada. They're pissed because you've done everything you can to destroy their livelihood, and now you're taking their money, you're stealing from them and giving it to a province that is trying to actually help and destroy the fucking their fucking tar sands. And you're saying that the people in Quebec deserve this money? There is actually right now people are trying to push to have pretty much right now Quebec is trying to put out hydroelectricity. I believe right now they're trying to pass off hydroelectricity to other provinces. But there is actually a movement right now to not buy this for the same reason that Quebec that's going on in Alberta. That because Quebec has done everything it can to not allow the tar sands to move its oil, especially over to the fucking Maritimes where they can use the jobs. So you're getting screwed over, Newfoundland. You're getting screwed over, PEI, New Brunswick. These places where people are starving for jobs. They are starving for jobs, and Quebec is doing everything it can to prevent this. So now people are in protest of Quebec and their policies, are trying to make sure that their hydroelectricity doesn't get out to the other provinces. And I support that. I am absolutely in favor of that. Fuck you, Quebec government, for this piece of shit. You know what? I've been a little hard in the past about, when it came to the Quebec nationalists because of being separatists and things like that. But you know what? One thing I kind of learned over the last little bit is that these Quebec nationalists are more patriotic to Canada than the actual non-separatists. I know that's I saw so many fleur-de-lis out there. There were plenty of people over from Quebec that were protesting against the Global Compact for Migration and have been against Roxham Road, while the average Quebecer out there are the ones that are actually want the Global Compact to be there. These are the globalists, while the Quebec nationalists are the true patriots of this country. So you know what? And I still have some problems when it comes to the Quebec nationalists, that they seem to have more affinity for Quebec than they do the rest of Canada. But they still have more affinity for our country than the fucking average Quebecer does. So from now on, whenever I speak in general terms about Quebec, I'm leaving out the Quebec nationalists. I have different problems with them every now and then, but most of my problems come from the Quebec government and the average Quebecer out there who are the real globalists, the real anti-Canadians. So, if you think that this Global Compact for Migration is non-binding, you are dead wrong, because it is going to be solidified into Canadian law, especially with the government that we have now. And I gotta admit, I'm not super positive about the other parties out there that it's still not, that they're going to pull out of the agreement. If they do, if, say, Andrew Scheer gets voted into office, I will give him credit for that and say, good for you. But let's not forget that they really waited too long to bring this up. Most people were unaware of this until this past week, right before it got signed. It's too late by then. But the one thing about this protest that ended up going on Parliament Hill and around Canada that I saw was that this was the beginning of Canada's revolution. I firmly believe that. I firmly believe that we are in the midst of a change here in Canada. People are pissed off. They don't feel that they're represented by their government. They don't feel that they're represented by the people who are supposed to represent them. And what ended up happening with the Global Compact for Migration is a perfect example of that. It's a perfect example because we had a bunch of Canadians who were against it, and they signed it anyway. So with what's going on in France with the Yellow Vest movement, the Gilets jaunes, we are seeing this spread to other areas of the European Union, and we're seeing it here. There were people out there in their yellow vests, out on Parliament Hill, out in front of City Hall in Toronto, and all across Canada, which means that there is a revolution coming. Now, I'm not saying that when we talk about a revolution, it's necessarily going to be as violent and as bloody as the one that's been going on in France, which is going to be the next topic I'm talking about. But I believe that this is coming here. That if we don't start seeing better representation for the Canadian people, you will see what happened in France here. I'm starting to believe that. And it's because of this, I don't actually own one. But I'm going out to buy myself a yellow vest sometime this week. Because I show support for the yellow vest over in France. The people who are pissed off with Emmanuel Macron because he has done absolutely nothing for them. He is very similar to Justin Trudeau. In fact, even the media has done comparisons to him about how Macron is very similar to Justin Trudeau. And we see this because Macron has shown support, and he's done everything he can for the rich elites in France. He made tax cuts that benefited them, not tax cuts that benefited the average worker out there. In fact, it actually, especially with this diesel tax that Macron was introducing, it actually showed that he was going to charge the average worker more, and then he was going to cut taxes on the elite, let them have their own money, and let them keep their own money. So he's in no way for the people, but it's wrong to just assume that what's going on in France is simply because of the diesel tax. It's everything. I mean, under Macron, they have seen how their violent crimes are up to an extraordinary amount, an amount that hasn't been seen in forever. Their immigration system is fucked. They have let in so many people that now they have, even before this ended up going down, there are countless videos, countless pictures, countless reports of the new immigrants that came into their country that were fighting with the locals, fighting with the police. So this is not about the diesel tax. The diesel tax was just the straw that broke the camel's back. That's all it was. And I believe that maybe not the carbon tax for us, but this global compact for migration is the straw that broke the camel's back for most people. It's the straw that broke the camel's back for me. They signed on to it, sold out our sovereignty. I've already shown you how, even though it's non-binding, it's still going to affect us here in Canada. And to me, the bailout towards the media was just the first step in this implementation of what he's doing. What Trudeau is doing to show that he is in support of the compact, and he's going to implement what is inside the compact by this non-elective global government. And it seems clear to me, though, that when it comes to yellow vests here in Canada, the Canadian yellow vest movement, it's going to gain traction. People are starting to see it. The average Canadian is starting to see it. Those who even pay a small attention to politics. I'm not talking about political junkies like you and me, people who spend our day reading the news, people who spend their day listening to what our elected officials are saying. You know what? They're elected traitors. That's what they are. I think that's how I'm going to try and refer to them from now on. Elected traitors in the Liberal government. We're talking about the average Canadian who is seeing jobs go. We are seeing how we are being taxed more, and it's the same thing when it comes to Justin Trudeau. He has shown more support for the rich. In fact, the rich have gotten richer in Canada. The middle class, the ones that he's said that he is fighting for, they are the ones being screwed. And if anybody whoever saw my my take on the fall fiscal updates, I added both commentary one and a non-commentary one, but the articles in both, where it shows that, in fact, since Justin Trudeau has gotten richer, since Justin Trudeau came into power as the Prime Minister, the Prime Traitor, he has now taxed the middle class more and more. 80% of the middle class pay more in taxes than they did before. And if the Yellow Vest movement takes off here in Canada, then I believe that what we're going to see is very similar to what we see in France. And what we're seeing in France is a lot of violence on behalf of the police. Now, don't get me wrong. There's violence on the Gilets Jaunes side. It seems like it's going to be inevitable. But the amount of violence that's coming out of the police, what they're doing to people who are not being violent, and what they're doing to the elderly, the disabled, is disgusting. And I have some, I've been retweeting for the last week or so, just any videos I can of this, what's going on here in, France. So here we go. We got combat vehicles that are being brought in, armored vehicles. But what's concerning about it, especially what Macron has talked about, how he wants an EU army, is these are bearing the EU flag. Now, I spoke a while ago, I can't even remember how long ago it was about this, but I spoke about a video that Styx Hexenhammer came out with, where Styx said the problem with the EU army is that if you're having protests, such as what we're seeing in France right now, what's going to happen is that local police forces aren't going to be the ones dealing with it, but this EU army are the ones. So people who come from different countries are going to come in. And if you think the violence is bad enough with what you're seeing in France, but amongst local police officers, it's going to get even worse. Now, it's not all police officers. In fact, many of the fire department, many of the police officers, and even these riot police that we're seeing right now have shown solidarity with the Gilets Jaunes. They've shown solidarity by taking off their helmets, turning their back on Macron, doing everything they can. But let's browse some videos as to what's taking place right now. That was loud. But we can see that they're bearing the EU flag. They're not bearing the French flag. Let's see, where was that? I think it was on the side there. Yep, right there. Right there on the side there, you can see the blue flag with the circular stars. That is the EU flag, which is showing that these people are in the pockets of I guess it's not a global government, but it's part of a continental government, which doesn't represent the average citizens. All it does is represent the countries themselves. It represents the elected people, the people already in government, and the ones who have pull with these, the government themselves. But the average person, this is the problem with global governments or continental governments, and why I'm extremely opposed to the idea of an American Union, which is something that has been proposed a few times. I don't believe it would ever go through under Donald Trump, but you get another president in after him, you might just see it. But the problem is that already, as it stands, in countries, you have too many problems. The population's already too big to have everybody represented in government. But now you want to take this and put it on an even more massive scale, on a continental scale, on a global scale, like the UN. And you expect that the voices of the people are going to be heard? Not every single, most sci-fi movies, most of these have these type of governments, these global governments, which all they do is crack down on the people. These dystopian futures, and this is exactly what we're going to see if you see some sort of American Union come in, or if the UN starts taking even more control than it already does. Let's see what else. Okay, this is a bit of a graphic one, so anybody who's not interested in graphic details, I suggest you look away for the next few minutes. I'll let you know when it's off screen.
Putain, mais stop là! Aidez-moi. Tu veux faire quoi?
What this was is a young protester lost her eye from a flashball shot fired by the police. She got hit in the eye. And you know what? There's plenty of protesters who have been injured by beanbags, by explosions. The tear gas has been firing non-stop by the police. And in fact, it's not even just like that the riots are taking place and a lot of violence going down, and so the police use the tear gas in order to break things out. No, in fact, they have trapped some of these people. We're going to go now to YouTube video by We Are Change. We Are Change has been doing great work. Fantastic work on the ground. He's literally been there on the ground in Paris taking video footage of this. He has been in the center of this shit for the last week or more. And he's got amazing footage. Now what you're seeing here, I'm not playing the audio of it, but what you're seeing here is a bunch of yellow vests. Now what is significant about this is the fact that these yellow vests are pinned into this area right here. This is where he says gas everywhere. Gas everywhere from the streets of Paris. So the police have lined themselves up, their riot police, all along all the exits. All the exits to this area right here. And so that way, these yellow vests have nowhere to go. And they've just been firing tear gas after tear gas after tear gas canisters into this group. So they can't disperse. There's nothing they can do. They are literally hemmed in from all sides, and they're being assaulted by the police. They're being assaulted by this dystopian gang. This is what the riot police in France are right now. They are a fucking gang who are there to commit acts of violence. I mean, we're going to see a lot of videos. We have them flipping a guy out of a wheelchair. We have them body slamming a fucking elderly man. We have them dragging a woman by her hair away. We have seen people who are standing there, arms outstretched, that have then been hit with beanbags and other things. They're literally just standing there, and this is what ends up happening. But as we kind of take more of a look through, you can see it's unbelievable. Look how much tear gas is there, and most of these people don't actually have some form of respirator. They don't even have goggles. They're using their shirts. Even this guy here, I don't know his name actually, but he even stated that. Let's pause that. He even stated that he's wearing a respirator. He's got the goggles on, and he could still he was still getting the gas in between his goggles. He could still inhale some of it. He was still coughing. He was still teary-eyed because of it. So this is what they're doing. And don't get me wrong, I mean, there's plenty of other things that the Gilets Jaunes have done. We've seen how plenty of cars have been going up in flames. But this is the absolute state of Paris right now. It's unbelievable. Okay, let's go back to Twitter, try and get some more. Here. Oh, here we go. Man in wheelchair.
Oh! Oh, vous faites tomber par terre là.
These riot police scum, these gendarmes, ended up flipping the guy out of his fucking wheelchair. Have you seen anything more disgusting? Have you seen anything more dystopian? I mean, shit. Everything that's going on right now in France, the other day I ended up rewatching V for Vendetta, and I swear you can find similarities by the way these people are acting with the way that the world was in that movie. And if you've never seen V for Vendetta, not only is it a great movie, but I find it's good, one of those good movies and books. I've never read the book though. But it's one of those good stories about the way your future can go. I would actually put it in next to novels such as 1984, something like that, or A Brave New World. It's fantastic. But yeah, member of the gendarmerie tossed its sailman out of a wheelchair. Incident took place in Bessin, France. We have 153 high school students that are being forced to sit there. Students were made kneel and put their hands on their head by the police. Unbelievable. Because they were showing solidarity. Reportedly barricading the streets. You know, I've seen stuff like this before. Although, the thing is, when I see this, what makes me think about is it makes me think about all those pictures I've seen from such as the Soviet Russia or communist China, where people would be sitting there kneeling on their grounds with their hands on their head while another soldier stands behind them with a fucking gun to their head, about to blow their fucking brains out. And then usually the next photo you see is a mass grave that these people are sitting in. This is what I'm expecting. And you know what? This also is, I'm not going to go deep into this debate, but this is reasons like this that I believe that guns should be actually be something for the people, that guns rights are important. This is something America has done great, that they allow their people to be armed. And they say, well, it's to fight back against the government. And then you always have the anti-gun people say, well, when are you going to ever have to do that? Right now. We are witnessing it in France as they're fighting back against their government. And there are times where the government forces are being unbelievably brutal to them. People have died, and it's not the police who are dying. No, it's the average citizen who are dying. It hasn't reached a terrible breaking point yet, but it might. If this keeps going, we may see French police officers open fire on a crowd of the yellow vests. There are even some people who are saying that there are reports that there's been snipers that have been deployed by the French police. There's one video that's out there that's kind of making the rounds. It's kind of making the rounds, and I don't know if I have it here. I know I retweeted it, but I think it was a long time ago, like a couple weeks ago, where it's a clip from a news source where you just see a guy who's just standing in the streets, and then he just goes down. But it doesn't look like he got hit and injured. It looks like he got fucking shot. I'll see if I can find this. Oh, and by the way, just going back to something earlier, this is the, as you can see here, this is exactly the interview I was talking about between Rosemary Barton and Justin Trudeau earlier. Let's see here. There's got to be more. That no. Here we go. We have a woman being dragged by her hair by the it's being dragged by her hair by the gendarme. I mean, look how upset she is. That must have hurt like hell to do something like that. Okay, and then we've seen that. Here's an old man getting slammed to the ground. An old man in protest gets slammed to the ground. Another video of that. Yes, Trudeau's an airhead. Is there anything else that I have right now? Oh, here we go. Here's a guy standing. Boom! Shot. I don't think he got shot in the nuts, but he got shot in like the liver or something like that. That hurts like hell. Those beanbags hurt like hell. So I show affinity with the people of France. The Gilets jaunes. Oh, this, yeah. So this just came out the other day, and it says French media reported that Riot Police have some kind of secret liquid weapon in case of absolute emergency on Saturday. This liquid would apparently have been able to neutralize dozens of protesters, even if protesters were equipped with masks. So that's getting pretty extreme. And I think that's all I have right now. Let's see if there's anything else down here. This was in Brussels, I believe, where they were protesting against the... What were they protesting against? It was the European Parliament, but I felt like it was... I think this has more to do with what's going on in, like, this is the spread of the Yellow Vest movement in France. I don't think it was against the Global Compact. But anyway, this is coming to a neighborhood near you. If we keep going down this path, we will see what ends up happening. I mean, this Yellow Vest movement has been spreading all over Europe right now, so you can expect more of it is going to be coming here. I would say that I hope that we have our own revolution of sorts. I'm not sure if I actually would say that. I wouldn't say that I'm hoping that the violence breaks out to that extent, but I think Canada needs to have this revolution. We have been sold out by our government, we've been sold out by our representatives, and it doesn't matter whether you're conservative, whether you're liberal, whether you're NDP, all these groups have sold us out. Harper ended up signing in the UN Agenda 2030. Where do you think the Paris Climate Agreement came from? Where do you think that the Global Compact for Migration came from? Where do you think the next one is going to come from? This next global agreement that's going to be signed on. We are at a tipping point. We are at a tipping point where you need to decide which side you're on. You're on the side of the globalists or you're on the side of the patriots. If you're on the side of the globalists and you side with the UN, you want to be a part of the UN, then I'm sorry, you're on the wrong side. You're on the side of global dictatorship. You're on the side of these cops and what they're doing in France. You're on the side of selling out your sovereignty to small interest groups, to the UN, and other countries. This is what you're doing. Our government right now, the Liberal government, are traitors. That's who they are. They are treasonous pieces of shit scum. Now, what has yet to be determined is whether the Conservative Party are treasonous piece of shit scum. Because if they're going to keep going on with what the UN wants, if they want to continue being a part of the UN, then they are not for the people like they claim. But this has to be determined too with other parties. Are the NDP in the pockets of the globalists? Well, you don't even have to say that. They are in full support of the 2030 agenda. They're in full support of moving Canada to become a socialist government, to be a more interconnected global part of the global community. See, when we're talking about globalism, we're not talking about trade. There's nothing wrong with trade. Well, depends who you're trading with. I mean, personally, I'm not crazy about trade with China because that's just a way for China to spread its influence. But this is not what we're talking about. We're talking about people that want to harness control. A small group of people made up of all the global governments that want to harness control up at the top for themselves. And then we're left out of it. It's a big list, and you and I are not on it, to quote George Carlin. And then when it comes to the PPC party, well, right now it seems like Maxime Bernier is on the side of the Patriots, but this is yet to be determined. This is yet to be determined until he can get out there more. And everybody who watches this must know that I am more in support for Maxime Bernier because he's against these sort of things like the UN. He's against a lot of these globalist these globalist institutions. And this is really, I find, where the divide comes between PPC and CPC, is that the CPC, and this, I'm only staying on this very briefly because I don't want to turn this into one of those videos, is that the people who support CPC want Trudeau out of office, and they think, and most of them, I'm sure, believe that when he's out of office, things are going to get better. I don't believe that, and I'm pretty sure most of the people who are supporting Maxime Bernier and the PPC don't believe that either. That we believe that if it's one or the other, you're going to get the same results, just in a different time frame, more or less. And when it comes to someone like Maxime Bernier, he is, for me, my last stand when it comes to trusting a politician. If he lets me down, I will never trust a politician again. I will never support a party again, because I'm putting all my eggs in this basket. But if he turns out to be just another politician, just one in it for himself, just one person who is going to sell us out to small interest groups, sell us out to the UN and other countries, I'll never support another politician again. But this is why I hope that this sort of yellow jacket movement comes to Canada, because it starts with us. It's not going to be our politicians. It's going to be us that makes the difference. But we have to stand up and fight for that. I mean, Canada was built on a nation of fighters. That was one thing about especially when it came to things such as World War I, is that the British were all very well-dressed, well-groomed type of people. But what separated the Canadians is they were gritty, they were dirty, they were people who worked with their hands, they were fighters because they were still living in a harsh time. This is what they needed. But we've become so passive over the last little bit. The fact that half the world thinks we're too nice or thinks that we're pussies because of it shows that we've become too soft. And it's time for Canada to stand up and fight for our country, fight for our sovereignty, fight for our people, fight for us. That's what we need to do. And I hope that the Gilets Jaunes movement over in France is the inspiration that Canada needs in order to fight back. Thank you all for joining me on the episode today. I know I was a little heated throughout it than I normally am, but I'm getting tired of it all. I'm really getting tired of it. And I hope that there's change that comes soon. All right. I'll talk to you guys soon.